It is Tuesday, March 12th. We are in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. It is 6:10. We're 10 minutes late, but we will have our meeting. Mrs. Oden is here. Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, I'm here.
Mr. Kaufman? Not here. Mr. Guarino, the alternate?
I'm here.
And we also have Ms. Raymond, President of the Board. We have Mr. Donovan, and we have Sean Smith, Head of Plant Operations. So thank you, and we're set. The first issue we have, or the first thing on the agenda, are the contracts. Mr. Donovan?
Okay, we have two contracts, both of which fall under Mr. Smith's purview. So I will turn them over to him, and he can discuss them.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So the first one I'll talk about is the wood floor refinishing. We're coming off a 5-year contract with New England Sports Floors and put out an RFP for services to do the work this summer. We only had 2 respondents, one of which was American Sports Floor. Their pricing was in line with what we paid this past year, so I felt it was reasonable. And as you can see from the attachment, I won't name the company, but they were like 10 times the amount. I got in touch with them. I talked to the owner, and he was amazed at the disparity. But I assured him that the lower price was in fact what we've been paying. So I recommend, you can see they recommend a motion on the 3rd paragraph of the cover memo to award the contract for wood floor refinishing to American Sports Floors in the amount of $43,089, which includes an allowance for floorboard replacement of $2,000, and we'll pay for this out of deferred maintenance.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this contract is for all the schools, if any?
Correct. So all the wood floors for all the gymnasiums, which are in all the elementary schools except for Mount Pleasant, which is a VCT or tile floor. It also includes the stages in, let's say, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 schools. And cafeterias, we have 4 that have wood floors. So it does all of those.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure of the timing. This contract is for 1 year, or is that what it?
I'm just asking for approval for 1 year tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Donovan?
So the previous contract was a 5-year deal. Did you ask for just 1 year or multiple years when you put the bid up?
I believe I asked for 1 year, but I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
Tonight, I'm just asking for approval for 1 year.
Okay. I have a question. The disparity in cost is just amazing, to say the least. I do have the one question. Have we been pleased with the work of this company?
So we were with another company who did not bid this time around. We've used these people in the past. They're actually the company that did all the floor refinishing for Harvey when we did the various elementary schools. And they also installed the floors of the 2 high schools, 15, 16 years ago. So yes, we've been pleased with the work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll make a motion and see if I can get a second. I'd like to recommend that we award the contract for wood floor refinishing to American Sports Floors, Inc. in the amount of $43,089, which includes an allowance for floorboard replacement of $2,000, funding from deferred maintenance.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Roll call.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay.
Okay, so the second contract I'm recommending for approval tonight is conversion of the lighting at two schools, Main Dunstable and Burchill, to LED. This takes advantage of the Smart Start program that Eversource runs, whereby they pay all the upfront cost, and then we pay them back out of our utility bill with the savings that they have calculated, which we've also had a hand in approving. So I believe you have these sheets that look something like this in your
Right here.
package. So it's the Public Service Company of New Hampshire, so they still have their PSNH moniker on the top of the form. But I'm recommending that we approve the conversion of to LED at Burchill and Main Dunstable. I further recommend that we take the shorter payback period for both, which would be 73 months for Burchill and 71 months for Main Dunstable. So the recommended motion is at the bottom of the cover memo that I provided.
Okay.
Question.
I was just going to say, I forgot you last time. Mr. Mosher, do you have something?
Yeah, just a quick question. This seems to be the same way we afford the lighting for the parking lots. To have it paid out of the savings over the incandescent.
Yes, so it's, and we've also done a couple other schools this way. We've done Pennachuck Middle School and New Searles Elementary and some other schools before that. So it's a very good program. You know, we don't have to pay
How
anything.
is the lighting working out? Does it?
Very well, very
I mean-
well. It's, we have the proper lumens everywhere. We've had a couple of minor failures here and there, but the company has come out and replaced them fairly promptly.
Very good.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? I just have one. The shorter payback period I see is at 73 months, and the longer one is 96. Am I wrong? Am I reading the?
That's correct.
Okay. 73, 96. Okay. So I will move to approve the Smart Start agreement with Eversource to convert the lighting in Main Dunstable and Burchill Elementary Schools with the shorter payback periods.
I will second that.
Thank you. Roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay. I guess at this point, we're moving on to number 2 on the agenda, the Bicentennial water stations.
Okay, I brought this to the board, the total purchase price, it's being, the PTO wants to put new water stations in place of the typical, I call it a bubbler, people call it a fountain, depends where you grew up. But there are new ones where and if you look at the second page of the handout, it's easy to take a water bottle, a large water bottle, slide it underneath and fill it up. Now, Mr. Smith, do we have some of these at the 2 Broad Street and Sunset where we redid them, or?
I believe so. We've also had these installed at the North High School. I haven't heard anything adverse. So the answer is yes, we have it installed in other schools, and I haven't heard any adverse comments about the installations.
Okay, so I generally, I think it's a good idea. The PTO is willing to put these in for Bicentennial. Every school does not have them. That's kind of what I just wanted to bring it to the board to let you know. In my opinion, I don't think it's a reason not, just because everyone doesn't have them, we can maybe move in that direction over time. Like I said, the cost will be nothing to the district, and to purchase two of them and have them installed, it's only $2,500. So it's not a very large expense. And I think with, more water, the better for our kids as they move around the schools, and as the weather gets warmer, even better for in the classroom.
Comment.
Yes, Mr. Mosher. Yes, Mr. Mosher.
Yeah, after reading the specifications, I find out the water is adequately filtered to remove any possible contaminants, and I think it's a good deal.
Were the students at North here looking to put in one of those also?
I'm pretty sure it's been a little bit, but I believe we already have one of these installed.
One, and they want another one at the other end of the building, was that it?
Yeah, and I think they were also having some sort of fundraiser where they were selling the bottles with the Titan
Okay.
or the N on it, or,
Uh-huh,
so it was sort of a combination.
okay. I know I use them at the gym I go to, and I certainly do appreciate it. So, thank you. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I have just two things. One, Sunset Heights has one of these in their gym, and when I was there 2 days a week forever for basketball season, all of the girls loved it. So I think that Bicentennial will also enjoy this. But I do have a question, because the quote says the quote is valid for 15 days. They're on the back page, and it's from the end of November. Is the PTO still confident that these numbers are good and they're able to pay for it?
I did not ask that question, but quite frequently, quotes have limits on them, but I would think they would still honor that price.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the PTO is paying for this, is that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I would like to make a motion to approve the installation of water stations at Bicentennial School to be paid for entirely by the PTO.
I second the motion.
Thank you.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0.
Thank you,
And-
Mr. Smith.
Moving right along. Oh, good night, Mr. Smith. Thank you. That's at the end. Okay. We're going on to the financial report for January.
Okay, since this is the month, we skipped 1 month of a finance and ops, I think it was January, because the committees were being put together. So this is the month we have 2 reports, so I suggest we'll take your February report. I think we'll go through that, and I'll bring up anything that may have happened in January, but I think instead of going through 2 reports, we'll just go through 1.
Thank you, that makes sense.
Okay. And typically, we go through the first, there's 2 reports in each, but why don't you flip to the second report, which shows you the month by month, and this way we can see January and February at the same time anyway. So if you flip to about the 5th page in the February packet, you can see the month by month. Yes. It says monthly actuals expenditure report at the top.
Thank you.
Okay, so we start with the first line, wages full-time. So if you sort of look across, you'll notice typically in September and October, you see the total wages full-time of about 6.2 million. Then it goes up slightly to 6.5, then it's 6.4. Then in January, it's much larger at 9 million, and then it goes back to 6.2. So basically, what the difference is how many payrolls are in each month. Every week we have a weekly payroll, which is all hourly staff, and every 2 weeks, the salaried staff gets paid. So for example, in September and October, we had 2 biweekly payrolls, we had 4 weekly payrolls. In November, it went up a little bit because we had 5 weekly payrolls. December, it went back down a little. It was a little bit higher, but it was 2 and 4. In January, there were 3 biweeklies and 5 weeklies. So that's about as high as you're going to get in a month. And that explains the 9 million. And then in February, we went back down to 2 and 4, which puts us at the 6.2, 6.3 number. So that sort of gives us a sense of comfort as we go along. And you can see the same sort of the little blips in the part-time wages. Though part-time isn't quite as predictable, it still has a predictability factor to it. Now you see the wages temporary, seasonal. Mr. Smith has a number of employees that are out on various injuries or disabilities at this point. So when they get to the point where they're no longer being paid, we hire a temp to fill their role. But it's not something that he budgets because he budgets for the person in the full-time payroll. So in his full-time payroll, he'll notice his number's a little lower, and this is where he'll see the increase here. Wages per diem, that is our subline. As you can see, it was, interestingly enough, October was the largest subs, and the last couple months have been a little under $100,000, so that's not bad. The next 51600 longevity, you notice the 387,000. We budgeted 385,000 on that line, so it's pretty close, 1,800 over. That is the longevity payment to the teachers, the principals, the non-affiliated, the clerical, the custodians. We pay them all now pretty much at the same time. The only group that's not in there is the paras. The paras used to get paid their longevity as part of their hourly rate. We've just recently sort of pulled that out in the last contract, so there will be one more payment to them, though the budget for it is in their wage line. But at this point, the amount we budgeted versus what was paid out was within a couple $1,000s, so that's a good thing. Then stipends for the month. Typically, it's 10 or 11,000, which is mostly head teacher stipends, maybe a couple of other small things. When it gets higher than that, typically it's the coaches. So in February, we paid the middle school athletic coaches. And then you'll notice in March, we'll play the high school numbers, and that's when the number will go up. In December, we paid the high school coaches for the fall season. In March, we'll pay the high school coaches for the winter season. Retirement and separation pay, as you can see, we've gone over budget by $12,000. As I've mentioned before, all the teachers have been paid out, but we did, interestingly enough, we have 2 electricians. They both retired at the same time. So we do have 2 new ones to take their place. Hopefully they're just as good. But that's why the 22,000 is higher. Because keep in mind, this line item is not just, if you leave and you have vacation time, you know, we pay you and it hits that line too. So we try to budget for the severance piece of it, but it's really hard to budget for the vacation. So I'm just hoping for the rest of this year there won't be too much more there, because this line was 200,000 over last year. It certainly doesn't look like we'll run into that, but it will be a little more than 12 when we're done.
Can I ask a question about the retirement pay?
Sure.
Any teachers or staff who decide to retire at the end of the school year, would that be counted on this year's or next year's?
It would go to next year's.
Okay, thank you.
Because they would retire as of June 30th, and we wouldn't pay them until next year.
Until July, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
You're welcome.
I have one question. The substitutes, that number was down. Might you know if that's because there were fewer people subbing or we didn't require as many? Do you know?
I would guess the first.
Okay.
We haven't had, there's been fewer subs available. I
Okay.
don't think, I'll look at that. In 2 months, I'll give the first forecast for this year. So I'll probably have that available at the April meet, no, well, probably May meeting, maybe at April, it depends on
Okay.
where we go with the budget. But I'll take a look at that point in time. But my guess is that we're just having fewer. I'm not sure that the teachers are out less. I think
Okay.
it's just we're having a harder time filling the spots.
Thank you.
Okay, Fringe Benefits, as I've said, that's pretty much just, those are allocations from the city. They're budgeted by the city, so it's really not going to be an effect on our specific budget. So you go to the next group, Professional and Technical Services. We're waiting for the accounting and audit. That's the Student Activity Fund audit. That invoice will probably be in the next month or two. And that should be under the 15,000, so we'll be fine. Legal services is pretty steady, as you can see. Medical services, that's $100 difference, but we'll take care of that. So if you slide down to the bottom line on that page, contracted services, you'll see there's a big jump there. It's $166,000 this month. There's one invoice in there that the board actually approved a couple months ago for Securidyne. We decided to have a contract maintenance contract with Securidyne. Previous years, we were just paying as we went, and so we did a 3-year contract, so that amount of $94,575 is in there. If you subtract that from the 166, you'd get 71,000, which is more in line with a typical spend on those months. Okay, so I always look at the electricity, heating, gas, and water just because, especially the first two are big numbers, and I don't really want to run over. We are running higher. We're about 150,000 higher than we were at the same point last year in electricity. Now, we'll still, I think, be okay budget-wise, but there's probably not going to be any excess in there. The heating gas is running about 50,000 less, so that's good news. And we're through February. We'll have, February and March, and then the May and June numbers are going to drop down significantly. So in total, those accounts are running more than they were last year, but they're still well within the budget. And the water it's a much smaller number, and it's about 10,000 different from last year, so that shouldn't be an issue. The HVAC maintenance, if you sort of take a look at that line, you'll notice the last 3 months, large numbers. Those are the contracts that we signed with Siemens and Control Technologies, and I believe those are all approved by the board. They sort of come due the middle of each school year. We don't have the staff to be able to manage all of the controls of all of our HVAC equipment, so we contract that out. So the 34,000 of that 36 is with one of the vendors, Control Technologies. Okay, other than that, it looks pretty good. Down under rentals, just taking a look, rentals is 16,000, 12,600 of that is the Brentwood, and the other 4,000 is the swimming pool for the swim teams at the high school. So we should be in pretty good shape with rentals. Now the next line under other services, telephone voice, you see a big jump, 21,000. I went back and looked, we didn't have an amount for 21,000 all of last year, so and telephone is hard to look at because there's so many different invoices that add up to this number, but there is in there a $12,600 invoice, which is for the internet charges at the high school from July. They didn't bill us. We switched providers. We moved from, I think, Fairpoint to Comcast. They didn't send a bill. This is a catch-up bill.
Okay.
So, but other than that, it's still, I expected that when we put the new phone system in, we would save money on this line. We're not saving money. So I'm going to do the best I can to try to figure it out. I probably need some help from IT, which they haven't really had some time to help me, but I think I'll make a project of it with some staff in the office and see if I can come up with something, because it's, like I said, it's gone up, it hasn't gone down, and that just doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure why.
Can I ask, isn't this the system that the city encouraged us to
Yes.
participate with them to save money?
Well, to get new phones, to get new capability, 911, et cetera, but yes, the point was we weren't supposed to, we may be paying more money sort of on a maintenance contract for the new phone system, but we didn't expect the phone line to go up. So but like I said, my understanding, Mr. Fahrenkopf had mentioned to me that what he called copper lines, because this is voice over IP, the new one, we're not going to need all those copper lines, so there's a possibility that we're still paying for copper lines that we're not using.
Okay.
So I think, that might be the thing to say, all right, we need to go in and cancel. And I know we need to keep a couple of copper lines per school because you want a backup, but that may be the problem. I'm not a phone expert by any stretch, so, but we'll be looking into that.
Who would we get to determine whether we need how many copper lines we need per school?
Well, probably Mr. Fahrenkopf. I think he
Oh,
would be the
okay.
one to answer that.
Okay.
Okay, the rest of these accounts, as you can see, they're pretty much small amounts on a monthly basis. There's not a big up and down either way. Game officials is a little up in the month of January, but, Lisa's in charge of that, and if you can count on anyone, you can count on Lisa. So, and then the last two lines, you'll notice the transportation services, the buses. The way we work with First Student is on the special education buses and the large buses. We have the daily rate, we have the annual rate, we divide it by 10, and we pay 1/10 each month. And then we pay for additional services, obviously, but for the basic contract, that's how we do it. So if you looked, you notice in December, there was hardly any money. The invoices didn't get in. They got caught up in January, and now we're back online in February. So we also have a separate, since this is a big number, we have a separate spreadsheet to track this, and it's pretty much up to date. There's like one of the monitor invoices, which is about 50 to 60,000, hasn't come in yet, but other than that, it's pretty much up to date. So, we're 59% through or 60% through the year, so those hopefully will be okay. And then if you flip over to page 3, my favorite account, tuition out of district. You can see it was $630,000. Now, the way we do it is we get invoiced by school. Some send an invoice quarterly, some send an invoice monthly. Sometimes some of the public schools send the invoice twice a year. We don't pay the invoice until the period of service has ended. So if someone decides to bill us on a quarterly basis, we wait until the quarter's over, make sure the student has stayed there the whole time, and then pay the invoice. But as you can see, we've spent 73%. We still have 4 months. This number's going to go much higher. I expect during the month of May, just like the last 2 years, that we're going to run out of funds in this account. Now, I do have a special revenue fund to cover some of it, and then the month of June will be the shuffling month, let's say.
I have a question. Sure. And I know we spoke about this at budget, but in the most recent proposed budget, at the lower 3.2, does that include the extra money
Yes.
for out of district that you think will cover it?
Yeah, it includes 800,000 of it, which I think will get us between, if that 800,000 can get in this budget, which I think it can, and then it might be a couple $100,000 less, but I do have a special revenue fund that generates enough revenue that I could charge 200,000 there. So it'll get us back to sort of a a base level. Now, if the costs continue to rise, that's another story. So I'm not suggesting that in the 2021 budget that you're not going to need a little, but it's not going to be 800,000. It might be 100 or 200. It'll be a lower number.
Okay, thank you.
Mr., did you have, I have a question. Any increases in tuition, have they already come through, or some of the schools that we have students in, are they waiting until later? Or do we usually know what the increase might be if a school is going to increase the tuition?
Yeah, typically they'll give an increase at the beginning of the school year.
Oh, okay.
So they'll let us know in the spring for the following year. Occasionally we don't find out until the last minute, but because we have, for example, Lighthouse School, we have approximately 20 students.
Mm-hmm.
An increase there is going to affect us a lot more than a school where we have 2 students. But for the most part, they have an annual, school year rate.
So do we already know what might be the rate at each school for the 2020 budget?
Probably not for all of them, no.
Not yet,
we
but
won't.
some?
Some, but really, we're not going to know until sort of May, June.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mosher, did you have anything?
No, I've been following them very closely here, and
Okay,
I don't see anything out of the ordinary.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, then supplies and materials, pretty straightforward. Most of these accounts are either the accounts where the schools are spending the money, like office supplies and educational supplies and medical. And then the ones in the middle, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, janitorial, those are Mr. Smith's accounts. And for the most part, you can see it's fairly equitable through there, and I don't really see any significant issues. Then there's the other expenses. You'll see indirect costs. Now, the indirect costs are the revenue that basically we generate by managing the grants, okay? So we will see in the month of March, we'll see a significant entry that at account of 93,000, so it'll be a negative 93,000, which is a good thing. That'll get us the 93 plus where we are with the 32. And I think the budget on that line is, 200 or something? So it'll get us close, and that'll get us through January. We still have 5 more months. But that's sort of a lumpy, we don't make these entries every single month. We sort of make them mostly in the second 6 months of the year, but we should be fine with that. The equipment, percentage-wise, when you look at percent used, you'll notice that it's very high, but that's typical. We do most of the spending for computer equipment and software in the beginning of the year because we're going to use it all year. And then there's, on the last page there's furniture and fixtures and miscellaneous. Those are at a lower spend level, which is typical for this time of year for those also.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Ms. Scales brought up chairs last night.
Yes, you did.
Is that coming out of there, or does that come out of the school fund?
It would hit that line, it would hit the furniture and fixture line. It depends on what they have in their budget right now. I don't have funds in the sort of non-school budgets to give them as much as they need. I'm hoping to be able to find some as we get towards the end of the year.
Okay.
Okay?
Sorry. I know that South had ordered some chairs last year, and they were ordering different ones. Have they found those new chairs more durable than the older chairs?
I haven't heard one way or another. They're newer chairs, so I'm sure they're better, but they haven't commented on them.
It might be good information for North to have, should they.
Need more,
Mhm.
exactly. Okay, so in total, when you look at the very bottom right-hand corner on the last page, you'll notice percent used, 61.96%. So some of these accounts are sort of what I call fiscal year, full year accounts. Some are school year accounts. So a fiscal year account, we're 8 out of 12 months, which is 66.6%. School year was 6 out of 10, which is 60%. So you expect that number to be in between those two, which it is, and it's on the lower end, and that's the hope. So I think, as I've said, we still have out of district will be an issue. I'm hoping when I go through my forecast, that's when I'll forecast all the labor dollars. I'll get a real good sense of where we're going to be with labor dollars. And then it's just watching the final couple months of spend and see if we need to slow up on anything. I have control over some things, but I don't have control over a lot of other things, so. But like I said, probably in May, I will do a forecast through April, and then we'll get a better sense of where we're gonna be.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, nice job, thank you.
Okay, now, the transfer report, so I'll just run through these quickly. The first one is special education. They're taking funds from full-time salaries to contracted services. Typically, we don't do this, but they are down a couple of psychologists. One psychologist, they weren't able to hire at all. They put out an offer, somebody turned it down, and they spent probably the first 6 months trying to get a psychologist. They couldn't get it mid-year. So I agreed that they could take the funds that they had in the payroll and move it to contracted services. So now we're using a contracted service people, and they're coming in and helping out here and there. It's not one person that works every day, it's different people that work a day or two a week. So it's gonna cost us more. Contracted services typically will cost more than an employee. You don't have benefits and things. But that's why we're making that entry.
So,
Go ahead.
so just to clarify this in my own mind, we had an advertisement for a school psychologist, and we were not able to fill that position.
Yes, there was, the head psychologist at the time was trying to fill the position. I think there was a mix-up somewhere. He was under the impression that he made an offer to a person, he thought that person was coming. We didn't find out until August that the person wasn't coming, and I don't know all the details of it right now, but, so it was late in the year, just as the school year was starting, by the time we realized that this position wasn't filled. They tried multiple times to try to fill it, but they're not easy positions to find, and they're very difficult if you're trying to find them in the middle of the year. So that's
Right,
what
'cause
happened.
people who are school psychologists don't typically leave in the middle of the year.
Exactly.
So, I'm sorry,
No,
Dottie.
go right
Will
ahead.
this money go for next year? Will this $60,000 stay in contract services, or next year
No.
it's just a one-time kind of thing, and then
Yeah.
next year it's back into?
Yes.
And so I would have the expectation in that starting in like, what,
Soon.
April, or even now, we would be posting for a school psychologist
Yes,
because we really need them
yes.
badly.
Yes, and I think almost every single year, there's a little turnover in school psychologists.
Well, it's an extremely challenging job.
It is. And it's also one that they're in the teacher's contract, so if you don't have any experience, you don't make lots of money your first few years. So I think there's an opportunity after they get some experience for them to maybe try another field or area and get a significant raise.
Right. I would just like to say it for the public, but you don't get the pension and the benefits that you get here. Just FYI,
Exactly.
working for the school is better.
You're not part of a retirement fund, and you get good health insurance. They have to be part of a consortium, and even that is extremely expensive when you're doing it. We did lose a psychologist at the high school level in the middle of this year. Have we replaced, is that being contracted
That's being contracted also.
also?
Yeah.
So we have two that are on contract
Exactly.
services. Okay.
Okay, the next one is from the curriculum office. Basically, they're just, curriculum office pays for the PSAT, which I believe every junior takes at the high schools. They just didn't have the money on the testing line. They had it on different lines when they put the budget together. The person who did the budget last year that was tracking the sheet moved on and someone else took it over. So this is just to make sure we charge it to the right place. Next one is Nashua High School North. They are moving money from supplies to equipment. They're going to purchase Chromebooks and a Chromebook, excuse me, carts for the junior ROTC, Air Force Junior ROTC program. So we have to spend our own money and charge it to our budget, and then we will get reimbursed from the government for this. So that will then hopefully come back in this school year so they can then use those funds. The government is very good about getting you the money. It's just if you're in a hurry, you might have a difficulty, but they will make the payment. Next one is Charlotte Ave School. They're purchasing projectors, so it's just taking it out of their conference seminars and putting it into equipment. The next one is Nashua North. Same thing, supplies to equipment to purchase projectors. Then the next one is Adult Ed. This is actually a special revenue fund. This isn't the operating budget, it's a special revenue fund. They only get budgeted sort of once a year, and so there's usually a lot of movement in these accounts if they want to buy something a little different. So they're moving from publications and advertising to travel and supplies, so small amounts of money. And then central office, this one, I took it out of the heating account for now just because I knew I had funds there, and it's to the copier maintenance. The way we do the copier maintenance is when the year ends, they tally up all our costs, color and black and white. They then send us a bill for 50% of that in, let's say, August. So we pay that. Then, middle of the year, we pay the other half. Then when we get to the end of the year, they true it up. So if we've spent more than we had the previous year, we'll get charged more. If we have less, then we'll get a credit towards either they'll send us a check or they'll put it towards the next year. And I think I might have spoken about this before, but so it's basically we're 9,800 over where we were the previous year. We're hoping that this will get a little better as we get to the end of the year. I also had someone put together a spreadsheet so we can take a look at which schools are spending more than they did last year, checking in and saying, okay, why are you so much higher than they were last year? So I'm hoping that it will improve as we get to the end of the year. So that's that one. And then there's an athletics one. Lisa is moving some money around between accounts to cover. They had a JV ice hockey teams this year. They haven't had those in a very long time, so that was to pay for their league fees. And the last one is Fairgrounds Middle School, and they're moving it from miscellaneous equipment to supplies, so to the opposite of what you see. Most people budget a lot in supplies. If they don't need them, they buy equipment at the end of the year. And this one, they're doing it. The tech ed department, I guess, does not need any equipment this year. So that is the transfer report. Those are the transfers.
Okay, are there any questions? I think you explained everything as you went along. Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay,
I think you got to approve it because there's some that are over 5,000.
okay. Let's see. On the transfers, right?
Yes.
Let's see, okay. Oh.
Do you need separate motions for each one that's over
No, you can just approve the transfer report, the February transfer report.
Oh, okay.
That's typically how we do it.
And that will include the ones that are over 5,000?
Yeah, that'll close all of them.
Okay. Let me look and see, just so we know how many are over.
1, 2. I count 3.
I see. What's your third one? Did I miss? In the beginning?
The
Yep.
special ed one.
I did, I missed that, okay. So we have 3 that are over 5,000 that are in this transfer report that need to have a motion. So I would make a motion to approve the transfer report of February 2019.
Second. On the motion to approve the February transfer report of February 2019, I think I said February twice. Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0.
Do we have any other business for tonight?
No, the last item is not necessary. We can take it off the agenda.
Okay.
Was this a budget thing?
Now, this was, I had a note from one of our board members who wanted to discuss it, but I had sent an email, and he says there's no need to discuss it any longer, so.
Okay.
Good. Well, he's chosen not to attend, so we can't speak to it anyways.
Okay. Motion, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
So moved, thank you.
Okay,
On the motion to adjourn, Mrs. Oden,
yes?
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. The meeting is adjourned at 6, is it 6?
6:57.
6:57 PM.